Keith Stanovich by Brittany Siggins. Keith Stanovich began his educational journey by receiving a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from The Ohio State University in 1973. He then completed his doctorate in psychology at the University of Michigan in 1977. That same year, Dr. Stanovich became an associate professor at Oakland University, which is located in Rochester, Michigan. He taught there until the year 1991. Since 1991, Keith Stanovich has taught at the University of Toronto, where he is currently Emeritus Professor of Applied Psychology and Human Development. Stanovich's concentration of work combines the fields of psychology, human development, and education. He has spent a lot of time researching and writing about rational thought and intelligence. He discovered that there is also often a discrepancy between rationality and what we consider to be a level of intelligence. He coined this term dysrationalia. Stanovich has dedicated a considerable amount of his research to reading and language disabilities, specifically focusing on dyslexia. He uses cognitive processing aspects of psychology, combined with the psychology of reading, to explain problems that occur in struggling readers and the impacts of such problems. Keith Stanovich is the author of 7 books. His most recent book, What Intelligence Tests Miss, expresses the inadequacy of our intelligence tests in that they often omit aspects of rational thought and decision-making, something that is crucial to daily problem solving. This groundbreaking book received the 2010 Grawemeyer Award in Education from the University of Louisville. He has published over 200 scholarly articles and was recognized as the most cited reading disability researcher in the world from the decade 1982 until 1992. His textbook, How to Think Straight About Psychology, has been adopted by over 400 institutions of higher education. Stanovich held the prestigious position of Associate Editor of the Merrill Palmer Quarterly. The Merrill Palmer Quarterly is a leading journal of human development. In the field of education, Stanovich's work focused on dyslexia. He worked to redefine the term as he believed many students were being misdiagnosed. He defined dyslexia as a learning disability stemming from a phonological processing deficit and characterized by the absence of problems in cognitive functioning. Struggling readers were placed into 2 categories. The first group was categorized as garden variety poor readers, describing those whose IQ is consistent with their performance. The second category, called IQ discrepant poor readers, described readers who are performing significantly below their IQ level in reading. Stanovich believed IQ discrepancy was not an accurate way to identify dyslexic readers. In 1995, Stanovich became the youngest inductee to the Reading Hall of Fame for his work. Stanovich's phonological core variable difference model is classified as a cognitive processing model to explain struggling readers. While he did not coin the term the Matthew effect, he was the first to apply the concept to the area of reading. In his article on the Matthew effect in reading, Stanovich concluded that children with phonemic awareness deficits are slower to break the sound symbol code in reading. Because of this delay, these students have less exposure to print and thus fewer opportunities to practice reading, develop vocabulary, and develop syntactic skills. They begin to fall farther and farther behind their peers in the area of reading. Motivation is also greatly impacted as students who struggle to read are less likely to want to read, and thus are reading less. When students transition from learning to read to reading to learn, this deficit no longer only applies to the area of reading, but seeps throughout every subject. This is described as a fan spread effect, because the problem that was once specific to reading is now generalized or fans out across subjects over time. His article on the Matthew effect in reading has been cited over 1,500 times. Let's hear what Keith Stanovich himself has to say about the Matthew effect.
And so Merton had this article in 1968 in which he used the term Matthew effect to describe scientific careers. Herb Wahlberg talked about Matthew effects with respect to achievement in general. educational achievement, but also other occupational endeavors. And then I stole the term third hand, I guess, from Wahlberg, and used it specifically as a term to model effects that are going on in the reading process itself, to embed the idea of cumulative advantage and disadvantage effects in a developmental model of reading. You have well-developed phonemic representations, hence you struggle less with the code, and your phonological decoding is good, so you recognize words well very early in your reading experience. If you recognize words very well, you have a lot of capacity left over for the high-level comprehension processes we were just talking about. If you have a lot of capacity for those, stories are interesting because you're thinking about them, and the stories are interesting, so you read more, and you read more, and you develop more of those decoding processes, and then interestingly, what I developed in the Matthew effects paper is even when let's say you get to further stages of reading where decoding processes are asymptoting and other types of high-level inferential processes are coming online, well, you have a built-in advantage there because all of this reading you've been doing has been building declarative knowledge, it's been building lexical distinctions, it's been building vocabulary, all of the things that you're going to need, let's say, post-fourth grade as well.
And this is a particularly important spot. You just went from Matthew effect into what reading does for the mind as far as reading as a cognitive exercise environment for making the kind of distinctions and critical reflection and extension into vocabulary differentiation and into the world that we just don't do if we don't read.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I titled the paper, does reading make you smarter? Precisely to provoke people to think about this. The conclusion of the paper was the answer is yes. If you default to what is pretty much a consensus view of intelligence, certainly there are two really separable domains of intelligence: so-called fluid intelligence, abstract problem solving, and the so-called crystallized intelligence, declarative knowledge, vocabulary, lexical distinctions, verbal facility. Now, since the Matthew effect paper, since some of the work that our group has done, but many other groups on the effects of reading, the effects of exposure to print, crystallized intelligence is just massively built by reading itself, independent of education, independent of fluid intelligence, regardless of what your levels of abstract problem solving are, you build declarative knowledge, you build lexical distinctions with reading, and reading is uniquely efficacious. Some work I always point to when I talk with teachers on this is by a psycholinguist by the name of Dawn Hayes. I think she mentioned this to you, where he's looked at what he calls the lexical density, of text of various types, and in particular the distinction between oral language and written language. So if you take a transcript off a network television show, or the transcripts from, let's say, hospital waiting room conversation or whatever, you can compute indices of lexical rarity, and they're quite interesting statistical indices of, let's say, the relative rarity of a word. In 10,000 words, or in 1,000 words, how many words will you encounter that are outside, let's say, the basic 5,000 word lexicon? And if vocabulary is going to grow after the fourth grade, then necessarily you have to be exposed to such words. Well, how often is that going to happen in texts of various types?
What are different venues that children or adults may find themselves in, and which words that are uncommon to their native, to their common oral language are going to occur enough for them to have any exposure and learn them?
That's exactly it. Well, and what Hayes has shown is that the factors is enormous. It's 5 to 1, 10 to 1, 20 to 1 that a written source is going to give you more of just those exposures. Okay, and so there's every reason to believe that print is uniquely efficacious on the side of crystallized intelligence. So if crystallized knowledge is part of your concept of intelligence, and it is for 90% of the theorists out there, then in fact reading does make you smarter.
Clearly, Keith Stanovich advocates that reading affects everything we do. I also believe that Keith Stanovich would be an advocate for early intervention programs like Jumpstart to help prevent the gap created between good readers and struggling readers. He would support intervention programs like Reading Recovery that provide students with additional time working in the area of literacy. He would caution schools to look closely at the amount of instruction our struggling readers are getting in English language arts subjects. These students should be getting more exposure and instruction than their peers if they hope to combat the Matthew effects. Lastly, as educators, we need to be careful when labeling students based on tests. Educators need to think critically about what the test measures and analyze all data before giving the student a label they will have for life. Now that you have seen my presentation on Keith Stanovich, visit my Padlet to tweet your reaction or something you learned about the work of Keith Stanovich. Don't forget your hashtags!